When I saw my husband disappear into the coat room with my brother's bride during the reception, I thought maybe he was just helping her with something. 5 minutes later, when I opened that door, I discovered a betrayal so twisted that it would unravel not just my marriage, but expose a conspiracy that had been 20 years in the making, and force me to confront truths about myself I'd spent a lifetime avoiding. My name is Victoria, and this is the story of how one November evening at an estate in Napa Valley changed everything I thought I knew about the people I loved most, and how the worst betrayal of my life became the catalyst for discovering who I really was beneath all the pretending. The morning of my brother's wedding started like something out of a magazine spread. Lucas, my younger brother by 3 years, was marrying Fiona, a curator at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art who had swept into our lives 18 months earlier with her elegant sophistication and sharp wit. I'd liked her immediately, admired how she challenged Lucas intellectually, how she made him think deeper, reach further. She seemed perfect for him in all the ways his previous girlfriends hadn't been. But that morning, as I helped her into her dress in the bridal suite, I noticed something I'd been too willfully blind to see before. Her hands were steady, completely unnaturally steady. Most brides I knew, including myself on my own wedding day 7 years ago, had trembled with nervous energy. But Fiona's fingers were calm as she fastened her earrings, her breathing even and controlled as she checked her reflection in the mirror. "Aren't you nervous?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light and teasing. She turned to me with that practiced smile I'd seen 100 times, warm but somehow never reaching all the way to her eyes. "Why would I be nervous? I'm getting exactly what I want." At the time, I'd thought she meant Lucas, meant love and partnership and a future together. Now I hear those words differently, understand the cold calculation behind them. But in that moment, I dismissed my unease, chalked it up to my own cynicism born from too many failed relationships before Christopher. My husband Christopher had been less enthusiastic about Fiona from the start, though I chalked it up to his protective nature toward my family. We'd had more than one argument about her in the months leading up to the wedding. "There's something calculated about her," he'd said one night after a dinner at their apartment, his voice tight with frustration. "Like she's always 3 steps ahead in a conversation you didn't know you were having. And the way she asks questions about the family, about your grandmother's trust, about Lucas's investments, it's not casual curiosity, Tori. It's reconnaissance." I'd been so angry at him that night, accused him of being jealous that Lucas had found someone, of manufacturing problems where none existed. "Not everyone has ulterior motives, Christopher," I'd snapped. "Some people are just interested in their partner's life, their partner's family. It's called normal relationship behavior." He'd looked at me then with an expression I couldn't quite read, something between pity and guilt, and I'd felt a flutter of unease in my stomach that I'd immediately suppressed. Christopher loved me. Christopher wanted to protect my family. His concerns came from a good place, even if they were misguided. Now looking back, I wonder if he knew something even then, if he recognized in Fiona what I'd been too trusting to see, because he himself was playing the same game from a different angle. Or maybe his warnings were meant to throw me off his own scent, to make him seem like the concerned husband while he plotted his own betrayal. I'll probably never know for certain, and that ambiguity haunts me still. The ceremony took place at a restored vineyard estate, all weathered stone and ancient grapevines turning gold in the autumn light. The air smelled of wine and wood smoke from the outdoor heaters scattered across the property, mixed with the sweetness of the thousands of white roses that Fiona had insisted on. Everything was perfect, meticulously planned down to the last detail. Later, I would realize that Fiona's obsession with perfection wasn't about creating a beautiful memory, but about crafting a performance so convincing that no one would question its sincerity. I stood beside my mother in the front row, Christopher's hand warm in mine, watching my baby brother's face transform with joy as Fiona walked down the aisle in a gown of champagne silk that caught the late afternoon sun. The dress had cost $40,000, I knew, because Fiona had told me with a laugh that seemed embarrassed but was probably calculating my reaction, gauging whether I'd think it excessive, whether I'd question how a museum curator could afford such an extravagance on her salary. "He looks so happy," I whispered to Christopher, squeezing his fingers, watching tears stream down Lucas's face as Fiona reached the altar. "Yeah," Christopher replied, but there was something hollow in his voice that I registered but didn't want to examine. "Not then." Not when I was too busy wiping away my own tears of joy, too consumed with the beauty of the moment to notice the shadow that crossed my husband's face when he looked at the bride, too willfully blind to see the way Fiona's eyes found Christopher in the crowd and held his gaze just a fraction too long before she turned to face my brother. The officiant was talking about love and commitment, about the sacred bond of marriage, about forsaking all others, and I felt Christopher's hand tighten on mine. I glanced up at him, saw his jaw clench, saw something flicker across his expression that might have been guilt or regret or fear. "You okay?" I mouthed, and he nodded, forcing a smile, but his palm had gone sweaty against mine, and I felt that flutter of unease again, that little voice in the back of my head that I'd gotten so good at ignoring over the years. My mother reached over and squeezed my other hand, her face radiant with happiness. She'd lost my father 10 years ago to a sudden heart attack, had raised Lucas and me through our teenage years as a single parent, had sacrificed so much to give us stability and opportunity. Seeing her youngest child getting married, settling down, building a life with someone she believed would care for him, meant everything to her. The joy on her face was so pure, so uncomplicated, that I felt my throat tighten with emotion. How would I tell her when the time came? How would I explain that the daughter-in-law she'd already embraced, already loved, was nothing but a con artist? That the perfect wedding she'd helped plan was really just the setup for a crime? Those questions would torment me in the weeks to come, but in that moment all I could do was hold her hand and pray that somehow, some way, we could protect her from the worst of the pain that was coming. Christopher and I had been married for 7 years, together for 10. We'd met in graduate school, him studying architecture, me finishing my doctorate in environmental science. I'd been drawn to his intensity, his passion for his work, the way he could talk for hours about the relationship between built environments and human behavior. He'd been drawn to my idealism, he said, my belief that science could save the world, my refusal to accept that some problems were too big to solve. Our wedding had been small and intimate, just family and close friends at a botanical garden in San Diego, followed by a honeymoon in Costa Rica where we'd hiked through rainforests and made love to the sound of howler monkeys and talked about the life we'd build together. We'd had our struggles, certainly. His architectural firm had nearly gone bankrupt in our 3rd year of marriage, and we'd spent 6 months living on my postdoc salary and credit cards while he scrambled to save his business. But we'd survived it, I thought. We'd come through stronger on the other side. Or at least that's what I'd told myself. Now I wonder if that financial crisis was the beginning of the end. The moment when Christopher looked at my trust fund and my family's wealth and decided that love wasn't enough, that he needed more, that I was more valuable as a resource than as a partner. The thought makes me physically ill even now, years later, sitting here telling you this story. Because it means that half of our marriage, maybe more, was built on a lie. That the man I went to sleep beside every night, the man who held me when I cried about another failed IVF cycle, the man I trusted with every piece of myself, was really just waiting for the right moment to destroy me. If you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button. Your support means everything to me. The reception moved to a massive barn that had been transformed into something magical with thousands of fairy lights, white hydrangeas spilling from every surface, and tables dressed in ivory linen. I'd helped plan some of this with Fiona over the past 6 months, had spent hours discussing centerpieces and menu options, had grown closer to her as we navigated the chaos of wedding preparation together. She'd confided in me about her difficult relationship with her own mother, had asked my advice about dealing with Lucas's stubbornness about the guest list, had even cried on my shoulder once when the stress of planning became overwhelming. "You're the sister I never had," she told me that day, her eyes red and her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how I'd get through this without you, Victoria." I'd hugged her tightly, felt so honored that she trusted me, that she saw me as family already. Now I know those tears were as calculated as everything else, that she'd researched me thoroughly enough to know exactly what buttons to push, what vulnerabilities to exploit. I'd lost my own sister Sarah to leukemia when I was 19, and the grief of that loss had never fully healed. Fiona had found that wound and pressed on it deliberately, knowing it would bind me to her, would make me less likely to question her motives or scrutinize her behavior too closely. The first hour of the reception passed in the comfortable chaos of family celebrations. My mother's bridge club friends commandeered a corner table and held court, dissecting every detail of the ceremony with the enthusiasm of professional critics. Lucas's college roommates got progressively drunker and louder, their toasts becoming more embarrassing with each round. Fiona's colleagues from the museum circulated with the polished ease of people used to networking at gallery openings, their conversations about art and culture floating over the more raucous celebrations like a separate soundtrack. Toasts were made, laughter echoed off the high barn rafters, and I found myself caught up in conversation after conversation with relatives I hadn't seen in months. My cousin Rebecca cornered me by the bar, demanding to know when Christopher and I were finally going to have kids. My uncle Gerald wanted to talk about the latest climate change report and whether my research suggested we were past the point of no return. My mother's sister Diane, slightly drunk on champagne, told me I looked tired and should take better care of myself, that stress ages a woman faster than anything else. Through it all, Christopher stayed close at first, his arm around my waist, playing the attentive husband perfectly. He laughed at jokes, made small talk with my relatives, complimented Fiona on her dress and the beautiful ceremony. To anyone watching, we looked like the ideal couple, comfortable and connected after 7 years of marriage. But I was starting to notice things I'd been too distracted to see before. The way his eyes followed Fiona around the room, tracking her movements with an intensity that seemed excessive even for someone admiring a beautiful bride. The way he tensed whenever she and Lucas came near us, his body going rigid like he was bracing for something. The way he checked his phone obsessively, his thumb scrolling through messages with an urgency that didn't match his claim that he was just monitoring work emails. And then there was the moment about 45 minutes into the reception, when Fiona walked past our table on her way to the restroom, and I watched Christopher's hand move almost imperceptibly toward her, a gesture so brief I might have imagined it, before he caught himself and pulled back. She didn't acknowledge it, didn't even glance in his direction, but I saw a smile flicker across her lips, secretive and satisfied. "Honey, did you see that?" I started to ask, but Christopher cut me off. "Sorry, babe, I need to take this call," he said, his phone already at his ear, though I hadn't heard it ring. "Work emergency. Client crisis. I'll be right back." He was gone before I could respond, weaving through the crowd toward the exit with purposeful strides that belied his casual excuse. I watched him go, that flutter of unease in my stomach growing into something harder and sharper, something that felt almost like dread. I tried to shake it off, told myself I was being paranoid, that the stress of the wedding and my own unresolved issues about children and the future were making me see problems where none existed. I threw myself into the celebration, danced with my uncle, helped my mother coordinate the cake cutting, laughed at the best man's speech even though I'd heard most of the stories before. But Christopher didn't come back. 10 minutes passed, then 15, then 20. I tried calling his cell, but it went straight to voicemail. I sent him texts asking where he was, if everything was okay, but they remained unread, the little check marks never turning blue. "Have you seen Christopher?" I asked Lucas when I found him near the bar. His tie loosened and his face flushed with happiness and champagne. "Not recently," he said, squinting around the barn as if his missing brother-in-law might materialize from the crowd. "Why? Everything okay?" "Yeah, fine. He just stepped out to take a work call and hasn't come back yet." "I'm sure he's fine." But I wasn't sure. Something felt wrong, felt off in a way I couldn't articulate but couldn't ignore either. Lucas must have seen something in my expression because his smile faded slightly, replaced by the protective big brother look I'd known since childhood. "Want me to help you look for him?" he offered. No, this is your wedding. Stay here with your bride. I'll track him down." I kissed his cheek and headed back out into the night, the cold November air a shock after the warmth of the crowded barn. The venue was sprawling, with multiple buildings scattered across the property. The main barn where the reception was happening, a smaller events cottage that was serving as a coat check and storage area, a historic manor house that was used for overnight guests, and various utility buildings and winemaking facilities that had been closed off for the event. I wandered first toward the parking lot, thinking maybe Christopher had gone to the car for some reason, needed something from the trunk or wanted to make his phone call in private. But our sedan was right where we'd left it, locked and empty, and there was no sign of Christopher among the rows of vehicles gleaming under the parking lot lights. I turned back toward the main buildings, my heels clicking on the paved path, my breath visible in the cold air. The events cottage was about 50 yards from the main barn, and I saw light spilling from its windows into the darkness. That made sense, I thought. Maybe Christopher had gone there looking for a quiet place to take his call, somewhere away from the noise and chaos of the reception. As I approached, I heard voices. Low, urgent, unmistakably intimate. My hand froze on the door handle as recognition flooded through me, cold and terrible. Christopher's voice, rough in a way I knew too well, the way it got when he was aroused, when we were in bed together and he was too far gone to modulate his tone. And Fiona's laughter, breathy and soft and full of promise. My heart felt like it stopped. This couldn't be real. This had to be some horrible mistake, some misunderstanding I couldn't yet comprehend. Maybe Fiona was upset about something and Christopher was comforting her. Maybe I'd misread the tone of their voices, projected my own anxieties onto an innocent interaction. We have to be careful, she was saying. Lucas is starting to suspect something. He keeps asking why I'm so distracted. My heart felt like it stopped. This couldn't be real. This had to be some horrible mistake, some misunderstanding I couldn't yet comprehend. After tonight, we won't have to hide anymore, Christopher's voice responded, and I heard the rustle of fabric, the sound of bodies moving together. Once this is done, once we have what we need, we can finally be together properly. I should have burst through that door. I should have confronted them immediately, made a scene, demanded answers. But something held me frozen, some instinct that told me to listen, to learn, to understand the full scope of what was happening before I acted. I still can't believe he doesn't know, Fiona said, and I heard her sigh. Lucas is so trusting. Like his sister. They're both so easy to fool. The cruelty in her voice cut deeper than the betrayal itself. I pressed myself against the wall beside the door, my legs trembling, my mind racing. Victoria suspects nothing, Christopher agreed, and hearing him say my name in that dismissive tone made my stomach turn. She's been so wrapped up in being the perfect sister, the supportive family member. She never questioned why I encouraged her to help with the wedding planning, to spend more time with you and Lucas. It gave us the perfect cover. And the paperwork? Fiona asked. You're sure it will work? Positive. Lucas signed everything last week, thinking he was just updating his will before the wedding. He has no idea what those documents actually say. By Monday, your name will be on everything, the trust, the inheritance from your grandmother, the property holdings. And once you're legally married to him, it becomes community property. Even if he figures it out and tries to divorce you, California law means you walk away with half of everything. The inheritance. Of course. My grandmother had died 2 years ago, leaving a substantial trust that wouldn't fully transfer to Lucas until he married. $20 million, property in 3 states, investment portfolios carefully built over decades. I'd inherited a similar amount, had already received my portion because I'd been married longer. Lucas's was waiting, held in trust until he settled down, started a family, met the conditions my grandmother had carefully outlined. And what about Victoria's portion? Fiona asked. Is there any way to access that? That's where the long game comes in, Christopher said, and I heard him move closer to her. I've been married to her for 7 years. I know every password, every account number, every investment. I've already set up the framework for the transfers. Once we're ready, once this is secured, I'll file for divorce and take her for everything she's worth. My lawyer says I can make a legitimate claim for at least 40%, maybe more if I play the emotional abuse angle correctly. I had to cover my mouth to keep from gasping. 7 years. He'd been planning this for 7 years? Or had it started more recently, when Fiona entered our lives? You're brilliant, Fiona murmured, and I heard the sound of kissing, wet and enthusiastic. I knew from the moment I saw Lucas's profile on that dating app that this could work. Finding you was just bonus luck. When I realized his sister was married to an architect with his own practice, I knew we could work this from both sides. You played him perfectly, Christopher said, admiration clear in his voice. The cultured museum curator, the intellectual equal, the woman who challenged him. He never stood a chance. They laughed together, and the sound of it made rage bloom hot and bright in my chest. But I still didn't move. I needed to hear more. I needed to understand the full picture before I acted. What time do we meet Richard? Fiona asked, her voice becoming businesslike, shifting from passion to calculation in a heartbeat. Midnight at the hotel. He'll have the final documents ready for signature. By tomorrow morning, phase 1 will be complete. Then we just have to wait 3 months for everything to settle, file the divorce papers simultaneously, and disappear with our new fortune. Maybe the Cayman Islands. Maybe Switzerland. Somewhere they can't touch us, can't reverse what we've done. Richard. I knew that name intimately. Richard Kowalski, Christopher's business partner. The man who'd helped him start his architectural firm 6 years ago. I'd liked Richard, had invited him and his wife to our house for dinner countless times, had considered them friends. Had he been part of this conspiracy from the beginning? Had every conversation, every friendly dinner, every moment of supposed camaraderie been part of the setup? I should get back, Fiona said, and I heard the rustle of her dress, the sound of her adjusting her appearance. Lucas will be looking for me. Time for me to play the blushing bride again, the devoted wife, the woman so in love she can barely breathe. God, sometimes I disgust even myself. You're a brilliant actress, Christopher replied. That's why this works. That's why we're going to win. And I should find Victoria, he continued, his voice closer to the door now, close enough that I stumbled backward in panic, nearly tripping over my own heels. Make sure she hasn't noticed anything. Give her the attentive husband routine one more time. Maybe tell her how beautiful she looks tonight, how proud I am to be her husband. She eats that shit up. They laughed again, cold and merciless, and I finally moved, forcing my shaking legs to carry me back toward the main barn, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. By the time I reached the warmth and light of the reception, I'd made a decision that would change everything. I wouldn't confront them. Not yet. Not until I had a plan, not until I knew exactly how to fight back, not until I could be certain that when I struck it would be devastating and permanent and complete. What time do we meet Richard? Fiona asked, her voice becoming businesslike. Midnight at the hotel. He'll have the final documents ready for signature. By tomorrow morning, phase 1 will be complete. Then we just have to wait 3 months for everything to settle, file the divorce papers simultaneously, and disappear with our new fortune. Richard. I knew that name. Richard Kowalski, Christopher's business partner. The man who'd helped him start his architectural firm 6 years ago. Had he been part of this conspiracy from the beginning? I should get back, Fiona said. Lucas will be looking for me. Time for me to play the blushing bride again. And I should find Victoria, make sure she hasn't noticed anything. Give her the attentive husband routine one more time. I didn't wait to hear more. I moved quickly, silently, back toward the main barn, my mind spinning with what I'd learned. By the time I reached the warmth and light of the reception, I'd made a decision. I wouldn't confront them. Not yet. Not until I had a plan, not until I knew exactly how to fight back. I found my phone in my clutch and locked myself in a bathroom stall, my hands shaking as I opened my contacts. There was only one person I could trust with this, one person who would know exactly what to do. My brother Nathan. Nathan was 10 years older than Lucas and me, a corporate lawyer who specialized in financial fraud. He lived in New York now with his wife and 3 kids, had been unable to make the wedding because of a trial that couldn't be postponed. I called his cell, praying he'd answer despite the late hour on the East Coast. Tori. His voice was thick with sleep. Is everything okay? How's the wedding? Nathan, I need your help, I said quietly, fighting to keep my voice steady. And I need you to listen very carefully without interrupting. Lucas is in danger. We both are. To his credit, Nathan became immediately alert. Talk to me. I told him everything, every word I'd overheard, every detail of Christopher and Fiona's conspiracy. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Tori, I need you to do exactly as I say, Nathan finally spoke, his lawyer voice firm and commanding. First, don't confront them. Don't let them know you know anything. Can you do that? Yes, I said, though the thought of facing Christopher and pretending everything was normal made me want to vomit. Good. Second, I need you to document everything. Record conversations if you can do it safely, photograph documents, save emails. We need evidence that will hold up in court. Third, I'm getting on the first flight to San Francisco tomorrow morning. Until then, act normal. Be the devoted wife and sister. Give them no reason to suspect. What about Lucas? I asked. He signed something. Documents that Fiona and Christopher arranged. I'll handle Lucas, Nathan promised. But we have to be smart about this. If we tip our hand too early, they'll disappear with whatever they've already secured. We need to catch them in the act, with enough evidence to not only stop them but destroy them legally. Nathan, I'm scared. I know, little sister. But you're also brilliant and strong. You can do this. Now go back out there and show them the performance of your life. When I emerged from the bathroom, I saw Christopher standing near the bar, laughing with some of Lucas's college friends. He looked handsome in his tailored suit, relaxed and charming, every inch the devoted husband. The sight of him made my skin crawl, but I forced myself to smile as I approached, to slip my arm through his, to lean into him like nothing had changed. There you are, he said, kissing my temple. I was starting to worry. Just needed a moment, I replied, my voice light and easy. These heels are killing me. Want to dance? Do you think my decision to stay silent was right or wrong? Tell me in the comments. We danced, Christopher's arms around me, his body warm against mine, and I thought about all the times I'd felt safe in his embrace, had believed in the future we were building together. How much of it had been real? Had he ever loved me, or had I been a target from the beginning, a woman with money and trust issues that made her easy to manipulate? You're quiet, he murmured against my hair. Everything okay? Just emotional, I said, which was true, though not in the way he thought. Seeing Lucas so happy, thinking about our own wedding. That was a good day, Christopher said, and I felt him smile. Best decision I ever made. The lies rolled off his tongue so smoothly. 7 years of lies, 7 years of playing a role while plotting to destroy me. I felt rage building in my chest, hot and sharp, but I channeled it into determination. He wanted to play games? Fine. I'd show him what it meant to underestimate Victoria Hayes. After our dance, I excused myself to talk with my mother, who was holding court at a table with several of her bridge club friends. She looked radiant in her mother-of-the-groom blue dress, her face flushed with champagne and happiness. Darling, there you are, she said, pulling me down for a kiss. Isn't it perfect? Isn't Fiona just lovely? I looked across the barn to where Fiona stood beside Lucas, her hand in his, her face turned up to him with an expression of perfect adoration. She was beautiful, I had to admit. Dark hair swept into an elegant updo, her dress clinging to her slender frame, her smile bright and warm. She looked like the perfect bride, the perfect partner for my brother. And it was all a performance, every gesture calculated, every word designed to deceive. She's something, I agreed, keeping my voice neutral. I spent the rest of the evening playing my role flawlessly. I toasted the happy couple, I danced with Lucas, I laughed at jokes and posed for photos. And all the while I watched. I noticed the way Fiona's eyes tracked Christopher across the room. I saw the subtle nod they exchanged when they thought no one was looking. I catalogued every small tell, every moment of truth that broke through their careful facades. Around 11, Christopher told me he was exhausted and suggested we head back to our hotel. We were staying at the same property as most of the out-of-town guests, a boutique in about a mile from the venue. You go ahead, I said, squeezing his hand. I want to stay a bit longer with Lucas and Mom. I'll get a ride back later. He hesitated, clearly not liking the deviation from his plan. You're sure? I can wait. I'm sure. You look exhausted. Go get some sleep. Relief flickered across his face before he masked it. Okay. Don't be too late. He kissed me and I let him, tasting the lies on his lips. As soon as he left, I checked the time. 11:15. He was meeting Fiona and Richard at midnight. That gave me 45 minutes to prepare. I found Lucas in a quiet corner, taking a break from the festivities, his tie loosened and his jacket draped over a nearby chair. He smiled when he saw me, the same smile he'd had since childhood, open and trusting. My favorite sister, he said, pulling me into a hug. Your only sister, I reminded him, an old joke between us. Hey Tori, can I ask you something? He pulled back, his expression becoming serious. Has Fiona seemed different to you lately? Distant. My heart clenched. What do you mean? I don't know. It's probably just wedding stress, but sometimes I feel like her mind is somewhere else. Like she's planning something and not telling me about it. He laughed, but it sounded uncertain. I'm probably being paranoid. I wanted to tell him everything right then, Wanted to warn him about the woman he'd just married. But Nathan's words echoed in my mind. Don't tip our hand too early. Lucas, do you trust me? I asked instead. Of course. With my life. Then I need you to do something for me, and I need you to not ask questions until tomorrow. Can you do that? His eyes widened with concern. Tori, you're scaring me. I know, but I promise everything will make sense soon. I just need you to trust me for the next 24 hours. He studied my face, and I saw the moment he decided to believe me. Okay, what do you need? I need you to not be alone with Fiona tonight. I need you to tell her you're too drunk to drive back to the hotel, that you're crashing in one of the guest cottages here at the venue. Tell her to go back without you, that you'll see her in the morning. Tori, we just got married. She'll think. I know what she'll think. But please, Lucas, do this for me. He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw doubt and fear and confusion warring in his expression. But finally he nodded. Okay, but tomorrow you tell me what's going on. Tomorrow, I promised. I'll tell you everything. I watched from a distance as Lucas found Fiona and had what looked like a brief, heated conversation. She gestured animatedly, clearly not happy with his decision, but eventually she nodded and left, her posture rigid with suppressed anger. Perfect. She was off balance, which meant she might make mistakes. At 11:45, I made my excuses to my mother and slipped out of the barn. The night had turned cold, my breath visible in the air as I made my way through the darkness toward the parking lot. I'd driven separately from Christopher, insisted on having my own car in case I needed to run last-minute errands for the wedding. Now I was grateful for that small independence. I drove to the hotel, parked in a spot with a clear view of the main entrance and waited. At 3 minutes to midnight, I saw Fiona arrive in her rental car, still in her wedding dress. She looked around nervously before hurrying inside. 2 minutes later, a black Mercedes pulled up, and a man in his 50s climbed out. Richard Kowalski. I'd met him a dozen times at firm events, had thought him a good friend to Christopher, a trusted business partner. They were both inside now, probably waiting for Christopher. But Christopher wasn't coming, was he? He was supposed to be asleep in our room, exhausted from the long day. Unless Fiona had texted him after her conversation with Lucas. Unless they'd adjusted their plan on the fly. I waited, my phone in my hand, ready to record whatever happened next. At 12:15, the hotel's side door opened and Christopher emerged. He changed out of his suit into jeans and a dark sweater, clearly not wanting to be recognized. He looked around carefully before heading toward the Mercedes. My hand shook as I raised my phone and began recording. I captured him getting into the car, captured the three of them sitting together, Fiona in the front passenger seat turning to talk animatedly to Richard in the back. They were there for almost 30 minutes, papers being passed back and forth, pens moving across documents. I recorded it all. When they finally emerged, Fiona went back to her car and drove away, presumably back to the venue to keep up appearances. Richard left in his Mercedes, and Christopher stood alone in the parking lot for a moment, a satisfied smile on his face, before heading back into the hotel through the side entrance. I waited another 10 minutes, making sure he'd had time to get back to our room before I followed. My hands were still shaking as I unlocked our door, preparing for my next performance. The room was dark, and I could hear Christopher's even breathing from the bed. He was good. I give him that. He'd made it back, stripped down, and gotten into bed as if he'd been sleeping for hours. I undressed quietly in the bathroom, scrubbed off my makeup, and slid into bed beside him. He stirred, reaching for me in what I once would have thought was unconscious affection. "How was the rest of the party?" he murmured sleepily. "Perfect," I whispered back. Everything was absolutely perfect. The next morning, I woke early and slipped out of bed while Christopher still slept. I took my phone into the bathroom and sent everything I'd recorded to Nathan, along with a detailed email explaining what I'd observed. His response came within minutes. "Good work. I land at SFO at 10 a.m. Pick me up. We're going to war." I had breakfast with my mother and some relatives at the hotel restaurant, playing the happy, slightly hungover sister of the groom. Christopher joined us eventually, freshly showered and disgustingly chipper, playing his role as flawlessly as I played mine. "How's your head?" he asked, kissing my cheek as he sat down. Fuzzy, I lied. I may have had a bit too much champagne. That's my girl, he said with a laugh, and I wanted to throw my coffee in his face. I left him there and drove to the airport, my mind racing with what came next. Nathan emerged from arrivals looking sharp in a dark suit despite the early flight, his lawyer briefcase in hand. Show me everything, he said as soon as he got in the car. We sat in the parking garage while he watched the videos, read the documents, took notes. When he finished, his expression was grim but determined. They're good, he admitted. But they made mistakes. That midnight meeting? That's conspiracy to commit fraud. The documents Lucas signed? If they were obtained under false pretenses, they're invalid. And Christopher's plans to claim emotional abuse? With your testimony and this evidence, we can prove that's fraudulent too. What do we do now? I asked. Now we set a trap of our own, Nathan said with a cold smile. And we make sure when they fall into it, they fall hard. The plan Nathan laid out was risky but elegant. First, we needed to secure Lucas's assets immediately. Nathan had already contacted a judge he knew in San Francisco, explaining the situation. With the evidence I'd gathered, we could get an emergency injunction freezing all of Lucas's accounts and preventing any transfers or changes until a full hearing could be held. Nathan looked at me seriously across the small hotel room table, his lawyer instincts fully activated. Before we go any further, I need you to understand something, Tori. What we're about to do isn't just about catching them. It's about protecting yourself legally, emotionally, and financially for the rest of your life. Once we start this, there's no going back. Christopher will know you betrayed him, will know you played him the same way he played you. Are you prepared for that? For the anger, the possible retaliation, the complete destruction of any memory of love that might still exist between you. I met his eyes steadily, surprised by my own calmness. That love already doesn't exist, Nathan. It never existed. I was in love with a fiction, a character Christopher created to manipulate me. The real Christopher, the one I heard in that cottage, despises me. He thinks I'm weak and stupid and easy to fool. So yes, I'm prepared. I want him to know I outsmarted him. I want that to be the last thing he understands before everything comes crashing down. Nathan nodded slowly. Okay then. But we need to talk about Lucas. He's going to be devastated. Not just by Fiona's betrayal, but by the fact that we had to deceive him too, that we couldn't warn him fully, that he had to spend his wedding night confused and hurt without understanding why. I know, I said quietly, feeling guilt wash over me. But if we'd told him everything, he would have confronted Fiona immediately. He's not built for deception, Nathan. He can't hide his feelings. She would have known something was wrong, and they would have disappeared before we could stop them. You're right, Nathan agreed. But when this is over, when the dust settles, you're going to need to rebuild that relationship. Lucas has always looked up to you, has always trusted you completely. Having to lie to him, even for his own protection, is going to damage something between you. Are you prepared for that too? I hadn't thought about it in those terms, hadn't considered the collateral damage my decisions might cause to the relationships I valued most. But looking at Nathan's serious expression, I understood that this war wouldn't just destroy Christopher and Fiona. It would change everything, reshape every relationship I had, force me to become someone harder and more calculating than I'd ever wanted to be. I'll fix it with Lucas, I said, hoping I was right. When he understands why we did what we did, when he sees that we were protecting him, he'll forgive me. He has to. Second, we needed to catch Fiona and Christopher in the act of actually executing their fraud. It wasn't enough that they'd planned it. We needed evidence of them actually taking the money, actually betraying the people who trusted them. That's where you come in, Nathan said. I need you to go back to Berkeley, act normal and wait. I'm betting that now that they think everything is in place, they'll move quickly. Christopher will try to initiate the transfers from your accounts. Fiona will try to access Lucas's trust. And when they do, we'll have them. What about Lucas? I promised I'd explain everything to him today. Leave Lucas to me, Nathan said. I'll tell him enough to protect him without causing him to panic and tip them off. Trust me, Tori. This is what I do. So I drove back to Berkeley, back to the home I'd shared with Christopher for 5 years, a beautiful craftsman we'd renovated together, filled with memories that now felt poisoned. Christopher arrived home an hour after me, whistling as he came through the door. "Hey babe," he called out. "What a weekend. I'm exhausted." "Me too," I replied from the kitchen where I was making lunch. "But it was beautiful. Lucas looks so happy." "Yeah, Fiona's great for him," Christopher said, and I marveled at how easily the lies came, how smoothly he could betray my brother while pretending to care about his happiness. "They're going to have a good life together." The words hung in the air between us, poisonous and false, and I had to concentrate on my breathing to keep from screaming. We spent Sunday afternoon like a normal couple. We watched TV, though I couldn't have told you what show was on. We took a walk around the neighborhood, and Christopher held my hand, pointing out houses with architectural features he admired, talking about maybe buying a larger place when we finally had kids. Kids. The subject we'd been dancing around for 2 years, the source of so many late-night conversations and tearful arguments and moments of desperate hope. I'd wanted children so badly, had endured 3 rounds of IVF, had felt pieces of myself die with each negative pregnancy test. And all that time, Christopher had been planning to leave me, had been seeing my desire for a family as just another weakness to exploit. "You know," he said as we walked past a Victorian with a wraparound porch, "maybe we should seriously think about it this year. Kids, I mean. I know we've been saying next year for a while now, but watching Lucas and Fiona today made me realize life is short. We should start building the family we've always talked about." I looked up at him, saw the earnest expression on his face, the apparent sincerity in his eyes, and felt something inside me turn to ice. He was going to get me pregnant. That was part of the plan, wasn't it? Get me pregnant, use that pregnancy as leverage in the divorce, claim I was an unfit mother, use my emotional state and my history of depression during the fertility struggles against me. Take my child the same way he was taking everything else. The realization hit me like a physical blow, and I had to stop walking, had to bend over and pretend I'd gotten a stone in my shoe to hide the fact that I was about to break down completely. "You okay, babe?" Christopher asked, his hand on my back, his voice full of fake concern. "Fine," I managed. "Just need to adjust my shoe." We made dinner together that night, moving around our kitchen with the practiced ease of 7 years of marriage. He chopped vegetables while I marinated chicken. We shared a bottle of wine. We talked about nothing important, just the comfortable small talk of long-term partners. And the entire time I watched him, studied him, tried to understand how I'd been so completely fooled. If only he knew that in a few hours, Nathan would be sitting with Lucas, showing him evidence that his new bride was a con artist. If only he knew that his entire plan was about to collapse around him. Monday morning, Christopher left for work early. "Big client meeting," he explained. "Might be late tonight." "No problem," I said, kissing him goodbye. "I've got a ton of data analysis to catch up on anyway." As soon as his car pulled out of the driveway, I called Nathan. "He's gone." "What now?" "Now we wait," Nathan said. "I've got people monitoring all your accounts. The moment he tries to access anything, we'll know." It took less than 2 hours. At 10:30, my phone rang with a call from Nathan. "He's trying to transfer funds out of your investment account," Nathan said. $500,000 to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. My contact at your bank flagged it immediately. What do we do? Nothing. Let it go through. We need him to actually commit the crime before we can press charges. Nathan, that's my money. And we'll get it back. Trust me. We've already alerted the authorities in the Caymans. That money will be frozen the moment it hits that account. Let him think he's winning, Tori. Let him get confident. By noon, Christopher had transferred nearly $2 million from various accounts. By 3 p.m., he'd attempted to mortgage our house without my knowledge. Every move was documented, every transaction flagged. He was building his own prison, one wire transfer at a time. At 4, I got a text from him, "Working late. Don't wait up." I knew what that meant. He was probably meeting with Fiona and Richard, celebrating their success. And indeed, an hour later, Nathan confirmed that Fiona had been attempting to access Lucas's trust all day, using the documents Lucas had signed thinking they were just updates. "It's time," Nathan said. "Get out of the house. Come to my hotel. I don't want you there when this goes down." "When what goes down?" "The arrests. I've been coordinating with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division all day. They're moving in tonight. I packed a bag and drove to Nathan's hotel in San Francisco, my heart pounding. This was really happening. 7 years of marriage, 7 years of trust and love, all ending in handcuffs and federal charges. Lucas was at the hotel when I arrived, his face pale and drawn. Nathan had told him everything. We hugged without speaking, two siblings betrayed by the people we'd loved most. "I'm so sorry," I whispered. "This isn't your fault," Lucas said. "This is on them. They're the ones who chose to do this." We waited together, Nathan monitoring reports from his FBI contacts. At 9 p.m. the call came. Christopher had been arrested at his office, Richard at his home. Fiona had been harder to find, had apparently sensed something was wrong and attempted to run. But they caught her at San Francisco airport, trying to board a flight to Buenos Aires with a suitcase full of cash and fake documents. It was over. The next few weeks were a blur of lawyers, depositions, and media attention. The story was too good for the press to resist. The society wedding that turned into a federal fraud case, the brilliant cons that almost worked, the sister who brought them down. At 9 p.m. that Monday night, the call had finally come. Nathan's voice had been tight with controlled excitement. They got him. FBI arrested Christopher at his office about 20 minutes ago. He's being transported to the federal building downtown for processing. Richard was taken from his home at the same time. And Fiona. He'd paused, and I heard satisfaction in his voice. Fiona tried to run. They found her at San Francisco airport with a suitcase containing $127,000 in cash, fake passports for both her and Christopher, and airline tickets to Buenos Aires. She'd booked the flights before the wedding, Tori. She'd been planning to disappear all along. I'd sat down heavily, my legs suddenly unable to hold me. It was actually over. What happens now? I'd asked, my voice sounding distant and strange in my own ears. Now they get arraigned, probably tomorrow morning. With the evidence we have in Fiona's attempted flight, the judge will almost certainly deny bail. They'll be held pending trial, which could take months. And Tori? The FBI found more. They've been doing this for years. Fiona has 3 previous identities, 2 previous marriages that ended with wealthy men losing substantial amounts of money. This is what she does. This is who she is. 3 previous marriages. 3 other men who'd been where Lucas was now, devastated and betrayed. Their faith and love destroyed by a woman who saw them as nothing but opportunities. How many others had there been? How many lives had Fiona ruined in her pursuit of money and excitement and the thrill of the con? And Christopher? I'd heard myself ask. Did they find anything else about him? Nathan had hesitated, and I'd known whatever he was about to tell me would hurt. He's been systematically stealing from you for 3 years, Tori. Small amounts at first, amounts you'd never notice, always moved back before you reviewed the accounts. But in the last 6 months since he met Fiona, it escalated. He moved over $2 million into accounts you didn't know existed. We'll get it back, but Tori, you need to understand what that means. This wasn't recent desperation. This has been his plan almost from the beginning of your marriage. Almost from the beginning. Which meant that even in our good years, even when I believed we were happy and building something real, he'd been planning his exit strategy, setting up the infrastructure for my eventual destruction. Christopher's arrest hit me harder than I expected. Despite everything, despite his betrayal and his cruelty, I mourned the loss of what I'd thought we had. I grieved for the man I believed him to be, for the future we'd planned that was built on lies. It's okay to be sad, my therapist told me in one of our sessions. You didn't just lose your husband. You lost your sense of reality, your ability to trust your own judgment. That's a profound loss, and it's okay to grieve it. Dr. Helen Martinez became my lifeline in those first months. Twice a week, I sat in her office with its view of the Golden Gate Bridge and tried to piece together who I was without Christopher, without the marriage that had defined my adult life. We talked about trauma and betrayal, about the way con artists work by identifying and exploiting their victims' deepest desires and insecurities. He didn't choose you randomly, Dr. Martinez explained during one particularly difficult session. People like Christopher and Fiona are predators. They research their targets carefully, looking for specific vulnerabilities. Your history of loss with your father and your sister made you someone who valued family intensely, who would do anything to protect the people you loved. And your idealism, Your belief in the fundamental goodness of people made you less likely to question suspicious behavior. He saw all of that and used it against you. So I was marked from the beginning? I asked, feeling sick. He saw me at graduate school and thought, there's my target? Not necessarily. Sometimes these relationships do start with genuine attraction, maybe even genuine love. But somewhere along the line, Christopher made a choice. When his business was failing, when money became a problem, he looked at you and saw an opportunity instead of a partner. That choice is on him, Victoria. Not on you. But it felt like it was on me. It felt like I'd failed some fundamental test of judgment, like there was a flaw in me that had allowed this to happen. I spiraled into depression that first winter, barely able to get out of bed some days, calling in sick to work more often than I went in. My research projects languished. My colleagues stopped inviting me to lunches and happy hours after I turned them down too many times. Lucas was struggling too, but in different ways. While I turned inward, he turned angry. He threw himself into his work with manic intensity, staying at his office until midnight most nights, taking on projects that stretched him to his breaking point. When we did see each other, which was less often than either of us wanted, he was bitter and cynical in ways that broke my heart. How are we supposed to trust anyone ever again? He asked me one night over takeout in his apartment, which had become a bachelor disaster zone since Fiona left. How am I supposed to look at a woman and not wonder what she really wants from me? How do you date someone when you're worth $20 million and every person you meet knows it? I don't know, I admitted. I don't have answers, Lucas. I'm as lost as you are. At least you fought back, he said quietly. At least you did something. I let it happen. I signed those papers without reading them carefully. I ignored my gut feelings about her behavior in those last few weeks. I was so desperate to believe in what we had that I made myself blind. We both did, I told him. That's what they count on. That's how they win. They find people who want to believe in love, who want to trust, and they punish us for it. Our mother took it hardest in some ways. She blamed herself for not seeing through Fiona's act, for encouraging Lucas to marry her, for being so focused on wanting grandchildren that she'd missed all the warning signs. I spent many evenings with her drinking tea in her kitchen, assuring her that none of this was her fault, that Fiona and Christopher were simply that good at lying. But I pride myself on reading people, she'd say, her voice breaking. I raised 2 children alone after your father died. I thought I'd developed good instincts about character. And I liked her so much, Victoria. I thought she was perfect for Lucas. What does it say about me that I was so completely wrong? It says you're human, I replied. It says you wanted your son to be happy. That's not a character flaw, Mom. That's love. The legal proceedings dragged on for months. Christopher, Richard, and Fiona all had high-powered lawyers fighting to minimize their sentences, to cast doubt on the evidence, to paint themselves as victims of circumstances or misunderstandings. Watching them spin their stories, seeing them try to escape accountability for what they'd done, was almost as painful as the original betrayal. The legal proceedings dragged on for months. Christopher, Richard, and Fiona all had high-powered lawyers fighting to minimize their sentences, to cast doubt on the evidence, to paint themselves as victims of circumstances or misunderstandings. Watching them spin their stories, seeing them try to escape accountability for what they'd done, was almost as painful as the original betrayal. But eventually, faced with overwhelming evidence and the testimony of Fiona's previous victims who came forward once they heard about the case, all 3 accepted plea deals. Christopher got 5 years for financial fraud and identity theft. Richard got 3 years as an accessory. And Fiona, who had the longest criminal history of any of them, including 2 previous marriages that had ended under suspicious circumstances and evidence suggesting she'd been running cons since her early 20s, got 7 years. Before Christopher was sentenced, he asked to speak with me. His lawyer said he wanted to apologize, wanted closure. I almost refused. What could he possibly say that would matter? What words could undo 7 years of lies? But something in me needed to hear it, needed to look him in the eye one last time and understand, if I could, how he'd become the kind of person who could do what he'd done. We met in a conference room at the Federal Building, guards stationed at the door. Christopher looked thin and tired, his expensive clothes replaced with an orange jumpsuit. The confident architect I'd married was gone. replaced by someone defeated and diminished. When he saw me, something crumpled in his expression. "Victoria," he said quietly, his voice hoarse. "Thank you for coming. I didn't think you would." "You said you had something to tell me," I replied, keeping my voice neutral, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing how much this still hurt. He nodded, his hands clasped on the table between us, his shoulders hunched forward. "I wanted to say I'm sorry. I know that doesn't mean anything now, I know it doesn't fix what I did or make any of this okay. But I needed you to hear it anyway. I needed you to know that I regret what I did, even though I understand that regret is meaningless without the chance to make amends, which I'll never have." "Were any of it real?" I asked, the question that had haunted me through sleepless nights and therapy sessions, through the long process of legal proceedings, and the equally long process of trying to rebuild my shattered sense of self. "The first year? The first date? Our wedding day? When you held me after the miscarriages? Was any of it real? Or was I just a mark from the very beginning?" He looked down at his hands, and I saw genuine emotion flicker across his face for the first time. Pain maybe. Shame possibly. "In the beginning it was real. I met you at that library study session and I fell in love. That wasn't fake, Victoria. You have to believe that. You were brilliant and passionate and you believed in things so intensely, believed the world could be better, that people could be better. I'd never met anyone like you. Marrying you was the best decision I ever made in that moment." "Then what happened? When did I become just an opportunity to exploit?" "About 3 years in," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "The firm was failing. I was drowning in debt, making mistakes, losing clients, and I didn't know how to fix it. I looked at your trust fund, at all the money your grandmother had left you, at how easily you shared everything with me, and it seemed like such an easy solution. Just a few transfers here and there, amounts you'd never notice. It was supposed to be temporary, just until I got the business back on track. But it wasn't temporary. No. Once I started, I couldn't stop. And then I met Richard and he showed me how much more I could do, how much more strategic I could be about it. And then Fiona came along with her plan to target Lucas and it all just escalated. I told myself I still loved you, that I was doing it for us, for our future. But that was a lie too. I got greedy. I got cruel. And I destroyed everything good we ever had." His voice broke on the last words, and I saw tears in his eyes, genuine tears. But I felt nothing. No satisfaction in his pain, no vindication in his confession, no lingering affection for the man he claimed to have once been. He'd killed that man himself through his choices, through his actions, through his willingness to betray someone who'd loved him completely. "You're right," I said finally. "Your apology doesn't change anything. But I wanted you to know that I'm not destroyed. You tried to take everything from me, my money, my dignity, my ability to trust. But you failed. I'm still here. I'm still whole. And I'll recover from this and build something better than what we had, because what we had was built on lies." "I hope so," he whispered. "I really do hope so, Victoria. You deserve that. You deserve everything I couldn't give you. Don't." I cut him off, standing up. "Don't try to paint yourself as noble now. You're not the man who couldn't give me what I deserved. You're the man who deliberately tried to take everything I had. Own that. Spend your 5 years owning that completely." I walked to the door, then paused and turned back. "I hope when you get out, you figure out who you actually are underneath all the manipulation. Because the man I married doesn't exist. He never did. And whoever you become next needs to be better than what you've been." Do you think I handled that confrontation the right way? Was I too harsh or not harsh enough? Tell me in the comments what you would have said in my position. Lucas's recovery was harder than mine in some ways, different in others. He'd been married to Fiona for less than 48 hours, but the betrayal cut just as deep, maybe deeper because it was so concentrated, so absolute. One moment he'd been at the happiest point of his life, and the next everything he'd believed about his relationship, about the woman he'd chosen to spend his life with, had been revealed as lies. He blamed himself with an intensity that worried me. I knew something was off, he kept saying in those first months, his face haggard from lack of sleep and too much work. Why didn't I push harder? Why didn't I ask more questions? You noticed something wrong at the wedding, came to warn me even though you couldn't explain why. Why wasn't I paying attention? Because you loved her. I told him over and over, hoping he'd eventually believe it. Because you wanted to believe in what you had together. That's not a weakness, Lucas. That's being human. That's being capable of trust and love, and all the things that make life worth living. Yeah, well, being human sucks sometimes, he'd mutter. But I could see him slowly starting to internalize it, to understand that being fooled by a professional con artist wasn't a reflection of his character but of hers. We helped each other heal in the months that followed. Long walks on Ocean Beach where the cold wind and crashing waves matched our inner turbulence. Quiet dinners where we didn't have to pretend to be okay or put on brave faces. Movie nights where we could escape into other people's stories for a while. Find catharsis in fictional problems with neat resolutions. We both saw therapists, sometimes separately, sometimes together in family sessions where we tried to process not just what had been done to us but what we needed from each other going forward. We gave ourselves permission to be angry, to be sad, to be confused and uncertain, and sometimes completely lost. We stopped trying to be strong all the time, stopped performing recovery for the benefit of concerned friends and family, who wanted reassurance that we were okay. We learned that healing isn't linear, that you can have good days and terrible days, that sometimes you take 3 steps forward and 2 steps back, and that's all part of the process. My mother struggled in her own way, carrying guilt that wasn't hers to carry. She blamed herself for not seeing through Fiona's act, for encouraging the relationship with such enthusiasm, for being so focused on wanting Lucas to settle down and give her grandchildren that she'd missed every red flag waving in her face. I spent many evenings with her, sometimes with Lucas, sometimes alone, assuring her that Fiona had fooled everyone, that even Nathan with all his legal training and natural skepticism hadn't suspected the true depth of the conspiracy until I'd brought him evidence. But I should have known, she insisted one night, tears streaming down her face. I'm your mother. I'm supposed to protect you both. And instead I was pushing Lucas toward someone who was going to destroy him. I practically gift-wrapped my son for a criminal. Mom, she had 3 previous identities, Lucas said gently, taking her hand. She'd been doing this for years, probably decades. She was a professional. You're not supposed to be able to spot professionals. That's why they're successful. It took months, almost a year, for my mother to forgive herself, to accept that some people are simply that good at lying, that skilled at manipulation. And even then, I could see her second-guessing herself with every new person who came into our lives, watching them carefully for signs of deception, afraid to trust her own judgment again. A year after that terrible November wedding, Lucas and I took a trip to Ireland, just the 2 of us. We needed to get away from Berkeley and San Francisco, from the places saturated with memories of Christopher and Fiona, from the well-meaning friends who kept asking how we were doing, from the weight of everyone's concern and sympathy. We spent 2 weeks driving through the countryside in a rented car, staying in small B&Bs where nobody knew our story, hiking through ancient landscapes that had witnessed countless human dramas and survived them all. We talked for hours as we drove about our childhoods, about our father who died too young, about our sister Sarah and the hole her death had left in our family that had never fully healed. We talked about our grandmother, whose generous legacy had made us targets, and tried to reconcile our love for her with our complicated feelings about the money she'd left us. Do you ever wish she'd left it to charity instead? Lucas asked one afternoon as we sat on a cliff overlooking the Atlantic, the wind whipping through our hair. Sometimes, I admitted. But then I think about all the good that money could do, all the research I could fund, all the environmental projects I could support. And I realize the money itself isn't the problem. It's that there are people in the world who see it as more valuable than human life, than love, than basic decency. That's very philosophical of you, Lucas said with a small smile, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him in months. I have a lot of time to think these days, I replied. Turns out being betrayed and nearly destroyed by the person you trusted most gives you a lot of material for deep contemplation. We talked about what we wanted our futures to look like, how we could build lives that weren't defined by what had happened to us but weren't in denial about it either. Lucas admitted he was scared of dating again, terrified of letting anyone get close enough to hurt him the way Fiona had. How do I know? He asked as we stood in a misty Irish meadow, sheep grazing peacefully around us. How do I ever trust anyone again when I was so completely wrong about Fiona? When I missed every sign, ignored my own instincts, let myself be led into a trap. I don't know if you ever know for certain, I said honestly. I think trust is always a risk. But maybe next time, we'll be more careful with who we give it to. Maybe we'll listen to those instincts instead of dismissing them. Maybe we'll take things slower, demand more transparency, pay attention when things don't quite add up. That sounds exhausting, Lucas said. And really sad. Like we're going to spend the rest of our lives suspicious and guarded. Or, I suggested, maybe we'll eventually find people who are worthy of our trust. People who don't require us to be suspicious because they're open and honest and consistent. People who make trust easy instead of complicated. You really think people like that exist? I have to believe they do, I said. Because the alternative is too depressing. And I refuse to let Christopher and Fiona take that from me too. They took enough already. I think I'm going to be single for a while, Lucas said one evening as we sat in a pub in Galway, nursing pints of Guinness. Maybe a long while. The thought of trusting someone like that again terrifies me. I know what you mean, I agreed. Every time I think about dating, I wonder what that person really wants from me. Money, security, a nice house and a comfortable life? How do I trust that someone actually sees me, actually loves me for who I am? Did you know grandmother wrote me a letter? Lucas said suddenly. It was in the trust documents. She set it up so I'd only get it when I accessed the money for the first time. What did it say? She said that wealth is both a blessing and a burden, that people will always want what we have, and that we'd have to learn to protect ourselves without becoming cynical. She said the key was to build a life that mattered regardless of the money, to be people who were valuable for more than just our bank accounts. Smart woman, I said softly. She also said something else. She said that when you've been betrayed, it's easy to close your heart completely, to decide that trust is weakness. But she said real strength is being able to trust again anyway, to stay open even when you're scared, to choose hope over cynicism. I thought about that as we sat in comfortable silence, the sounds of Irish music and laughter surrounding us. My grandmother had been right, as she usually was. I could let Christopher's betrayal harden me, could spend the rest of my life suspicious and guarded. Or I could choose to heal, to forgive myself for being fooled, to stay open to the possibility that real love still existed somewhere. Took me 2 more years to start dating again. Small steps, coffee dates and casual dinners, always with an escape route planned. I met a lot of nice people who wanted nothing from me except good conversation. I met a few people who very clearly were interested in my money. And slowly I learned to trust my instincts again. To listen to that quiet voice inside that knew when something felt right and when it didn't. I met Devin at a climate science conference in Seattle. He was a journalist covering environmental issues, smart and funny, and completely unconcerned with my financial situation. He lived in a small apartment with 3 roommates, drove a beat-up Honda, and cared more about his work than material comfort. We talked for 4 hours that first night about everything and nothing, and when he asked for my number I gave it without hesitation. Full disclosure, I told him on our 3rd date. I come with baggage. A lot of it. We're in our 30s, he replied with a smile. Everyone has baggage. My ex-husband tried to steal millions of dollars from me, and is currently serving time in federal prison. Devin paused with his wine glass halfway to his lips. Okay, that's more substantial baggage than most. Want to tell me about it? So I did. I told him everything, all the gory details, watching his face for signs of judgment or fear or greed. But all I saw was compassion and anger on my behalf. That's horrific, he said when I finished. I'm so sorry you went through that. And I understand completely if you need to take things slowly, if you need proof that I'm not that kind of person. I do need that, I admitted. I need time and patience, and a lot of trust building before I can fully let someone in again. Then that's what you'll get, Devin said simply. For as long as you need. He kept that promise. For 6 months we dated casually, no pressure, no expectations. He never asked about my money, never suggested expensive dates or trips. He was content with pizza and movie nights, with hiking in the Marin Headlands, with long conversations about the things that mattered to us. And slowly my defenses came down. Slowly I began to believe that this was different, that he was different. Lucas recovered too, though he took longer than I did. He threw himself into his work as a software engineer, built a successful startup, traveled extensively. He dated occasionally but kept people at arm's length, still too wounded to fully trust. But 3 years after that disastrous wedding, he met Jasmine at a coding boot camp where he was teaching. She was a former teacher making a career change, unimpressed by his success and interested only in his mind and his heart. They became friends first, slowly building trust and intimacy without the pressure of romance. And when they finally did start dating, it was with a foundation of real knowledge and genuine connection. "I think I'm going to ask her to marry me," Lucas told me over dinner one night, 5 years after Fiona's betrayal. "But I want to make sure you're okay with that. I know weddings are complicated for us now." I looked at my brother, seeing the happiness and health in his face, the genuine love he had for this woman who appreciated him for who he actually was. "I'm more than okay with it," I assured him. "I'm thrilled. She's perfect for you. You don't think I'm rushing it? We've only been together 2 years. Lucas, after everything we've been through, 2 years of really getting to know someone, of building genuine trust, is exactly the right timeline. You're not that scared kid who got fooled anymore. You're a man who knows his worth and knows what real love looks like." The wedding was small, intimate, just family and close friends on a beach in Mendocino. No fancy venue, no expensive production, just 2 people who loved each other saying vows that actually meant something. I stood beside Lucas as his best woman, Devin beside me holding my hand, and watched my brother marry someone who deserved him. During the reception, as Lucas and Jasmine danced their first dance as husband and wife, Devin pulled me close. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "I'm thinking about endings and beginnings," I said. "About how sometimes the worst thing that can happen to you leads you to something better than you ever imagined. Not because the bad thing was good, but because you chose to heal instead of hide." That's pretty profound for a Saturday afternoon. I laughed. "I have my moments." "Speaking of beginnings," Devin said, suddenly nervous, "I have something I want to ask you." "Devin, if this is what I think it is, the answer is yes." He grinned. "You haven't even let me ask yet." "I know. But yes. To whatever comes next, to building something real together, to taking the risk again even though it's scary. Yes." He kissed me then, there on the beach with the sunset painting the sky gold and purple, with the sound of the ocean and my brother's laughter surrounding us. And for the first time since that terrible November night 5 years ago, I felt completely fully happy. Not the naive happiness of someone who doesn't know betrayal exists, but the earned happiness of someone who survived it and chose joy anyway. The last time I saw Christopher was 2 years into his sentence, when he reached out through his lawyer requesting another meeting. I almost said no, but something in me needed closure, needed to see where he'd ended up after all the dust had settled. He looked different. Older, yes, but also somehow more honest. The slick confidence was gone, replaced with something quieter and more genuine. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I know I don't deserve it." "You're right, you don't. But I came anyway. What did you want to tell me?" "I've been doing a lot of therapy in here," he said, "trying to understand how I became someone capable of what I did. And I wanted you to know that I finally get it, why what I did was so much worse than just stealing money. Tell me. I didn't just betray your trust. I weaponized your love. I took the most vulnerable parts of you, the parts you only showed me because you felt safe, and I used them against you. I made you doubt yourself, doubt your judgment, doubt whether you were lovable at all. And that's unforgivable." I felt tears prick my eyes, but I didn't look away. "Yes, it is. But you need to know something else," he continued. "The fact that I could do that to you says nothing about you and everything about me. You didn't fail to see the real me. I failed to be someone worthy of you. You were always enough, Victoria. More than enough. And I hope you've found someone who sees that." "I have," I said softly. "And thank you for saying that. I think I needed to hear it, even though I don't need your permission to move on." "I know you don't. But I wanted to say it anyway. I wanted you to know that I finally understand what I destroyed, and I'll spend the rest of my life regretting it." As I left that prison for the last time, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I just felt free, lighter, ready for whatever came next. Christopher's betrayal had almost destroyed me, but in the end, it had revealed strengths I didn't know I had and taught me lessons I never wanted to learn but desperately needed to know. 7 years after that terrible wedding, I married Devin in a simple ceremony at my grandmother's estate in Sonoma. Lucas and Jasmine were there, along with Nathan and his family, my mother, and a small group of people we chosen carefully over years of building genuine connection. As I stood there saying vows to someone I truly knew and trusted, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment. If someone had told me on that November night 7 years ago, as I stood frozen outside a coat room listening to my husband plot to destroy me, that I would end up here, happy and whole and loved, I wouldn't have believed them. But healing isn't linear, and strength isn't about never being fooled. It's about what you do after the betrayal, how you choose to rebuild, whether you let bitterness win or whether you fight your way back to hope. I chose hope, and that made all the difference. If you like this story, hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe to get more stories from me. With love and respect, Auntie Helen Stories.